They say that legends never truly die, and in many ways, that's true. Their music, their words, and their memories live on in the hearts of people forever. But sometimes, it's the quiet moments at the end of a life that speak louder than all the years of fame combined. This was the case with Ozzy Osbourne, the man fans lovingly called the Prince of Darkness. The world knew him for his wild performances, his unforgettable voice, and his larger-than-life personality. But what happened during his final days was something no one expected. It was emotional, intimate, and incredibly human. His last words, spoken softly in a private room, touched the hearts of everyone around him. They weren't loud. They weren't dramatic. But they meant everything. What did he say before he left this world behind? What really happened in those last few days? The truth is more touching than anyone imagined. By the summer of 2025, something had changed. Fans could feel it, even if they couldn't explain it. For many years, Ozzy had dealt with a long list of health problems. There had been hospital visits, surgeries, and public updates about his condition. But during those final weeks, things felt different. There wasn't the usual noise, the excitement, or the wild energy people were used to seeing around him. Instead, there was a strange calmness, a silence that surrounded him like an old friend. After a life filled with loud music, roaring crowds, and constant motion, quiet had finally taken over. And surprisingly, Ozzy seemed to welcome it. He was staying at his estate in Buckinghamshire, a large home in the English countryside. It used to be a place of family gatherings and music, but in recent years, it had turned into more of a care centre. Medical equipment filled the rooms. Nurses and doctors came and went. After revealing in 2020 that he had Parkinson's disease, every small action he made became something people watched closely. If his hand shook or his walk was a little slower, people noticed. Ozzy tried to stay strong, showing the same bold and rebellious attitude that had made him famous. But inside, his body was slowly getting weaker. By 2023, he could no longer perform. He had gone through multiple spinal surgeries after a fall in 2019, and they had caused serious nerve damage. His balance, his speech, and even basic movements became difficult. The pain never truly left him. Touring was no longer possible, and he began cancelling public events. Even so, during the few times he did speak in interviews, people noticed something different in his voice. He still joked. He still had that unique, cheeky way of speaking. But there was a softness, a feeling of peace and deep reflection. His wife Sharon was always there, managing everything from his health to his business. She was his strength when he couldn't stand on his own. Quietly, she started limiting visitors to only close family and trusted friends. Most people outside had no idea how serious things had become. But those inside the home saw it all. They saw how Ozzy insisted on sitting at family dinners, even if he needed help getting there. They saw how he laughed whenever he could and how he still watched his favorite old horror movies late at night. He even listened to fan letters when he had the strength. On good days, someone would read them aloud, and Ozzy would smile. Sometimes, he'd tear up. Those moments reminded him that no matter how much his body changed, the love from fans remained the same. But then, in late June, something happened. News came out that Ozzy had caught a severe flu. At first, people didn't think much of it. But behind the scenes, the situation was much more serious. The flu affected his already weak immune system and made his Parkinson's symptoms worse. He was taken to the hospital for a few days, and though he came back home afterward, he was never quite the same again. His movements became even slower. He needed help with almost everything. Still, his mind was sharp. One nurse said it felt like Ozzy was trapped inside a body that wouldn't cooperate. He still made jokes. He still wanted his tea exactly the way he liked it. But each visit from his children felt more emotional. Every quiet talk in the hallway felt heavier. Everyone around him knew the truth, even if they didn't say it out loud. Ozzy was reaching the end. He spent a lot of time sitting near the window, looking outside. No one knew what he was thinking. Maybe it was about his childhood in Aston, where his journey first began. Maybe it was about the concerts, the fans, and the thousands of people who sang along with him. Maybe it was just the trees and the sky. He didn't say much, but there was something about the way he watched the world that felt like he was saying goodbye without using any words. Still, there was a feeling that he was waiting for something. It was like he knew there was one more thing he had to do. One more moment that hadn't happened yet. That final moment came unexpectedly, not in front of a massive audience, but in a much more personal way. Before that, though, Ozzy gave the world one last gift. One more surprise that showed just how much he still cared. On July 5, 2025, Ozzy made his final public appearance. The event was called Back to the Beginning, and it took place in Birmingham, near where he grew up. It was held at Villa Park, a stadium just a few miles from his old neighborhood. From the outside, it looked like a celebration. But those who were close to Ozzy knew it was more than that. It was a goodbye. Sharon had been planning it for months. She didn't want it to be a sad event. She wanted it to be a chance for people to say thank you, to feel the love one last time. Ozzy was helped onto a specially made throne in the center of the stage. There was no attempt to hide his condition. He looked tired. His body showed the signs of a long struggle. But his eyes still had that familiar spark. Giant screens behind him played videos from his life, photos from his childhood, clips from wild concerts, and quiet family moments. When he was handed the microphone, the stadium went silent. He didn't say much. Just a few words. "I don't know what to say," he began. "You've been with me all this time. Thank you from the bottom of my heart." The crowd cheered, some crying, some smiling. Ozzy didn't sing that night. His voice wasn't strong enough anymore. But he listened. He felt the music. He let it wash over him one last time. Many famous musicians joined the stage. Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler played War Pigs with a powerful energy that made the crowd go wild. Younger artists like Dave Grohl and Corey Taylor also came out to honor him. Backstage, there were tears. Some of the crew who had worked with Ozzy for years couldn't stop crying. The show was emotional, but it also felt like a celebration of everything he had done. And it raised an incredible amount of money, over $100 million, for Parkinson's research and children's charities. These causes were very important to Ozzy, not just because of his illness, but because of the help he had received during the hardest times of his life. Ozzy didn't stay for the whole show. After about an hour, he was quietly taken backstage. The music continued, but everyone knew he had made his final appearance. It wasn't sad. It felt right. It was a quiet ending after a lifetime of noise. That night, social media was filled with messages. Fans from all over the world, Japan, Brazil, the US, and more, shared videos and stories. Celebrities posted old photos and funny memories. Everyone seemed to feel the same thing. This was the end of something very special. Ozzy wasn't just stepping away from the spotlight. He was leaving the public world for good. When he returned home to Buckinghamshire, the estate looked peaceful. The lawns were green. The trees were tall. But inside, the house had changed. Over the years, rooms had been turned into places for medical care. There was a station for nurses, equipment to help him breathe, therapy tools, and medications. Ozzy's world had become smaller. He mostly stayed in one part of the house, surrounded by the people who loved him the most. His children visited often. Sharon was always there. Nurses helped him with everything he needed. And still, even in that quiet place, Ozzy found moments of joy. He liked to sit outside when the weather was good. Birds sang. Leaves rustled in the wind. Sometimes he would smile without saying a word. Other times, he would hum to himself, lost in a memory. When he had enough strength, he would ask someone to play music, his old songs, or the bands he loved. He would close his eyes and just listen. People say it was like he was traveling through time, feeling each moment all over again. And then, one evening, it happened. He was resting in his favorite chair, looking out the window. Sharon was holding his hand. One of his daughters was reading a letter from a fan. And Ozzy spoke his last words. They were quiet, but clear. He looked at Sharon and said, "Did I do good?" She smiled through her tears and nodded. "You did great," she said. Then, with a small smile, he closed his eyes. Ozzy Osbourne passed away not with noise, but with love. In a room filled with family, with the sound of birds outside and memories all around, he left this world. The news spread quickly. Fans were heartbroken. But there was also peace in knowing that his last moments were beautiful. No pain. No fear. Just a quiet goodbye from a man who had given everything to his music, his fans, and his family. In the days that followed, the tributes continued. Candlelight vigils were held around the world. Artists performed his songs in tribute concerts. Fans wrote letters and shared stories. His legacy, already massive, grew even stronger. People didn't just remember Ozzy for the wild man he had once been. They remembered the man who faced illness with courage. The man who said thank you when he had every reason to complain. The man who, even at the very end, cared more about others than himself. Legends never truly die. Ozzy Osbourne may be gone, but his voice, his music, and his spirit will live on forever. Through every guitar riff, every lyric, and every fan who sings along, he will echo through time. Not just as the Prince of Darkness, but as a reminder that even the wildest lives can end with peace, love, and one last beautiful whisper. The house that used to be full of music, laughter, and movement had now become a place of silence and calm. Ozzy Osbourne, the once powerful and wild rock legend, was now being wheeled into this quiet space by someone he knew well. Sharon, his wife and lifelong companion, stayed by his side every moment. To the public, she always appeared strong and calm, giving only a few careful updates and protecting Ozzy's privacy. But behind closed doors, she was the emotional support keeping everything from falling apart. While Ozzy's body was weakening, Sharon stayed steady, holding him through every difficult moment. Their children, Jack and Kelly, immediately came home to be with their father. Jack flew in from Los Angeles, and Kelly dropped everything to remain close to Ozzy. Even the grandchildren were present, walking slowly through the halls, their voices soft and their steps gentle. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they could feel the seriousness in the air. The family didn't talk much about what was going on. No big announcements were made. They didn't need to explain it. They all felt it deeply. The silence among them said more than any words could. Life in the house started to follow a slow and quiet routine. Ozzy usually woke up around mid-morning. By then, a nurse had already come in to check his health and give him his medicine. His breakfast was small, maybe just some tea and toast. On the good days, he would ask to watch old horror movies or documentaries about rock music. Most of the time, he would fall asleep halfway through, but that didn't matter to anyone. It wasn't about watching the whole film. It was about giving him peace and comfort. What stood out to everyone was how calm Ozzy was. He wasn't scared. He wasn't angry. He was just still. That didn't mean he didn't know what was going on. In fact, he was very aware. Ozzy had always had a sharp mind, even when things around him were chaotic. And in those final days, that sense of awareness became even stronger. He would look into someone's eyes and hold their gaze just a bit longer. He would suddenly reach out to hold someone's hand. He didn't speak much during these moments. He didn't need to. The quiet touch, the eye contact, it said everything. Only a few close friends came to visit. The family kept things private and limited to only the people Ozzy truly trusted. One friend who had played music with Ozzy for many years described visiting him as something haunting but peaceful. He expected to walk into a room filled with sadness and tension. Instead, he found Ozzy sitting quietly, looking very thin and pale, but completely present in the moment. The staff continued to care for him with a gentle routine. The meals came at the same times each day. The medications were given like clockwork. Soft reminders were spoken when needed. But even with this care, everyone around him knew things were getting harder. Ozzy's breathing became slower and more difficult. He slept longer and more often. Even the little ways he communicated, nodding, murmuring, squeezing hands, started to fade. But in the middle of that decline, there were moments when Ozzy was completely clear and aware. One evening, he sat near a window for nearly an hour. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask for music or television. He just looked outside at the garden, watching the trees and flowers move with the wind. When Sharon asked what he was thinking, he quietly said, "Nothing. Everything." No one knew exactly what was going through his mind. Maybe he was remembering moments from his past. Maybe he was just taking in everything around him one last time. But to those near him, it was clear that he wasn't afraid. He wasn't trying to hold on. He was waiting. Like a performer who knows the show is about to end. He was at peace. What the family didn't expect was that the final moment would come sooner than they thought, and not in the quiet comfort of their home, but in a hospital room. In the second week of July 2025, Ozzy's condition suddenly worsened. He developed a high fever and had trouble breathing. Because of his long list of health issues over the years, the family didn't take any chances. Sharon quickly arranged for him to be taken to a private hospital in London. He was admitted under precautionary observation, but the truth was, things were serious. Doctors were able to stabilize him within hours. But even the hospital staff, some of whom had cared for Ozzy before, could tell that something was different this time. The hospital room was plain and cold, with white walls and the soft beeping of machines. Ozzy had always disliked hospitals. He used to call them grey little prisons in interviews. But this time, he didn't fight it. He let the nurses do what they had to. He allowed the tests, the oxygen, the fours. He didn't protest. He had accepted it. One nurse said that Ozzy seemed incredibly calm, not sleepy or drugged, just completely present. He made eye contact with everyone who entered the room. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words had purpose. Sharon didn't leave his side, only stepping away for a few minutes at a time. She held his hand constantly, rubbing it gently. Jack and Kelly arrived soon after and took turns sitting beside him. They didn't need to ask questions. The doctors had already told them that Ozzy's body was too weak to recover this time. Ozzy spent most of the next day resting with his eyes closed. Every now and then, he would open them to look around the room, like he was searching for something or someone. Sharon leaned in and gently asked if he was in pain. He whispered, "No. I'm just thinking." That night, just before midnight, the family gathered again. The machines still beeped softly, but his breathing had become slower and harder. A doctor checked his pulse and gave Sharon a small nod. They knew the end was close. Then, Ozzy opened his eyes one more time. His voice was very faint, barely above a whisper, but he looked at his family and spoke his final words. They were not dramatic. He didn't give a speech. He simply said, "Tell them I love doing it until the end. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart." The room went silent. No one said anything. No one cried right away. They just sat with him, holding on to his last words. One nurse later said it felt like Ozzy had known exactly what to say. Like he had saved those words for the right time. After that, the family stayed with him quietly. Ozzy drifted in and out of sleep. Sometimes he gently squeezed Sharon's hand. Sometimes he just stared at the ceiling. He didn't speak again. And slowly, in the middle of the night, he passed away, surrounded by those who loved him. The next morning, July 22, 2025, the world found out. News outlets everywhere reported that Ozzy Osbourne had died peacefully. The family released a short, heartfelt message saying, "With more sadness than words can express, we share that Ozzy passed peacefully, surrounded by family, love, and light. We ask for privacy as we mourn the loss of a beloved husband, father, grandfather, and icon." Within minutes, tributes poured in from all over the globe. Fans, celebrities, musicians, and public figures shared their sorrow. The phrase "rest in power," Ozzy became a trending topic for more than 24 hours. It marked the end of a huge chapter in music history. For the fans, he was a legend. For his family, he was just their Ozzy. Sharon stayed out of the public eye, quiet and grieving. Those close to her said she looked strong on the outside, but was deeply broken inside. She had always handled everything: the business, the media, the travel, the chaos. Now, she had to handle her sorrow. Jack and Kelly each shared short messages online. Jack posted a picture of himself as a little boy on Ozzy's shoulders, writing, "My hero, my teacher, my dad. I love you forever." Kelly simply said, "The world is quieter now. I miss your voice already." Musicians from around the world paid tribute. Former members of Black Sabbath called him the voice of a generation and a true brother. Tony Iommi, who had spent a lifetime playing with Ozzy, said, "It feels like a part of my soul is gone." Elton John said, "Ozzy was chaos and compassion in one soul. We'll never see another like him." But perhaps the most moving tributes came from the fans. Candlelight vigils were held in cities across the world. In Los Angeles, fans gathered outside the Rainbow Bar and Grill, leaving flowers, records, and notes. In Birmingham, people lit candles outside the old factory buildings where Ozzy once worked before becoming famous. The family kept the funeral private. Only close family and a few dear friends were invited. There were no photographers, no reporters, just quiet music, shared memories, and silence. There was talk of a larger public event later, maybe in Birmingham or Los Angeles, but nothing had been decided yet. The world had to mourn in its own way. And strangely, that quiet goodbye seemed fitting. For someone whose life had been filled with noise, madness, and headlines, Ozzy left the world in a peaceful and humble way. No big scene. Just a last breath in the arms of his family. But even in his absence, he left behind something powerful, a voice, a presence, a memory that will never fade. Ozzy never wanted to be seen as a saint. He often joked that he'd be lucky if people remembered him at all. But what he truly wanted was to be remembered as someone who survived. And in many ways, that was the most powerful part of his story. Not just the music, or the fame, or the controversies, but the fact that he kept going. He survived. And that's how Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, said goodbye. Not with a scream, but with love. Not with a stage show, but with silence. And not with fear, but with gratitude. He may be gone, but his voice, raw, real, and unforgettable, will never stop echoing through the hearts of those who listened.